All right, so basically we are going to learn about UV mapping today. Okay, so basically just like as I told you, imagine peeling an orange, recording it, and then rewinding it and playing it backwards. So basically that's what we're doing today. We're like defining where the texture land on the 3D model. Okay, so we're in Maya. As usual, you set project to your project folder. You make sure that you have your project folders, and sometimes again you have to go set project and then set it again after you create the folders, right? So now if I go to open, it should look in the scenes folder. So I don't have a scene. I saved mine as an FBX right here. So I'm gonna cut it and go in here, and I'm just gonna put it in assets, and there it goes in the assets. So these are my exports, imports, you know, things I want to take into like Unreal Engine or whatever. I put it in that folder. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to import, and then it's still looking in scenes. We are going to go to assets and then FBX. Okay, now we've got this very cool letterbox, but let's have a look at it in wireframe unshaded mode. This button right here, and we can see it's very high poly. Look at that. So this person who modeled it really went all out and smoothed it and did some paper bending here. They've done some damage to the letterbox to give it some flair. It's all pretty good, but it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to try and UV map this, right? Because we have all these polygons. We can actually reduce polygons when we're at this stage. So if I go to mesh and I go to reduce, if your topology was correct, if I reduce it by 50%, it'll reduce it by 50%, as we see right here, right? So that's 50%. Now let's reduce it some more. Whoop. Percentage 50, enter. So now I go edit, delete type by history, and then we can go to mesh, reduce a bit more, and it reduces, and we can see it's creating some anomalies here, and I don't want that. So we're just gonna Control Z that. I'm gonna go in here and also modify, go to mesh, reduce, to just reduce it by half so that I can start working on it. So as you can see, we're getting some weirdness over here. That's not an issue, it's just the edges. So if we select all the edges and go to mesh display, and we can soften these edges and they'll look okay. So let's turn off wireframe unshaded, and we can see they're pretty much fine. So what's happening here is that we can select that edge, mesh display, harden edges. Or is it broken? It is broken. Look at that. So what we can do, go to vertices, edit mesh, and we can merge. So what this merge does, it looks at every vertex here, and within a certain radius, it's going to merge the vertices. So if I go and make that radius bigger, it's gonna like merge a lot of things together. So if I go to like 5 or 6 or 36, it's gonna merge a lot of them together. So now let's have a look at that. All right, it still looks broken. Let's see what's wrong with it. Seems all right. So let's start UV unwrapping this thing, okay? So first we've got a base here. You don't need to model that, but some of you might have gone beyond and just modeled the base. That's totally fine. You might have added your own flair or whatever. That's totally fine. Awesome. So if we go to the UV editor here, or in Window, Modeling, UV editor, we can see the UV map. So the UV map is basically this pole unwrapped for us here. So if I press this, I can see each square here. So you can see with this current UV map, we're getting a lot of stretching on the sides here, which is not good because we don't want a very stretched out texture on there, right? So this is our UV map. We can just use this to kind of dial that in so that we can actually see our UV map here. So this is called a UV shell, right? And we can modify this without really changing our model here. This is just a guide how the UV is going to be, how the texture is going to be projected onto this, okay? So how do we start fixing this, right? So for this one, we already have something here, which is totally great, but we got to figure out what's what. So if I select these, let's say vertices, right? Where are they? They're on this side, right? So if I press F, I can frame that. I may be able to dock this over here so I can see UV on one side and my tools on the other. So I can probably dock this somewhere as well. There we go. So I got my tools, my UV, and my viewport for convenience, right? So you can actually dock that somewhere in your monitor, or if you have multiple monitors, just like the class next door, you can also do that. So when I select this, I want to know where that is. So that's running down here, right? So these are those points. So basically I can become a tailor here. I mean, it doesn't show up very well on the projector there, but there are actually blue lines, nice UV frames here, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're going to find out the center. So we're gonna go to edge mode and we're just gonna select this, and we know that if we press F, we're gonna see this corner over here, okay? So selecting that, we're gonna go to cut and sew, and we're gonna cut it, right? Now that we've cut it, we can basically select this UV shell. So that's a separate shell. That's the end over here, you see? If I move it onto this part of the texture, you see the U1, right? And we've got a U and a 1 here. So if I do this, I can see that U1. Okay, but what's wrong with that? You know, it's tilted. So I can come in here and rotate it, rotate it, rotate it. So basically what I do here dictates how the texture is going to be projected onto this thing, right? So do we need to see this bottom here? Not really, right? So we can either delete these polygons here from our mesh. If I go to face, and I can just delete these because I don't need them. They're not gonna show up anywhere in my model, so that it saves me some UV space. So that's what you have to think about. Do I even see that part, right? If you don't see it, just delete it, right? So going forward, we know that we need this part because this part is this side of the post box, correct? So we're gonna go and find the top. Instead of me coming over here and trying to figure out where the top is, right? I can actually go on the model and figure out where the top is. So is it here? Yes, I can select it here and it'll already be selected over here. So it doesn't matter where you select it, you can start cutting it and stitching it together. So basically this is what UV mapping is a beautiful puzzle game that keeps you busy, all right? So let's have a look at this, all right? First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna see that when we selected that, all of this got selected. So that means when this thing goes around the whole model, right? That's that curve right here and over here, right? So maybe I just wanna move it up a curve and select that, or select this part or this part. That's the best part. So I'm gonna cut it over here. And the moment I cut it, you see the line gets thicker. That means it's a separate shell. So this is one shell and this is another shell, right? So right now I'm seeing all these different objects that I don't want to see right now because I'm just working on the post here. The way we can do this is by pressing Alt H. So Alt H just shows us what we're working on. If you want to bring everything else back, you can press Control Shift H to bring everything back. So let me just go to object mode real quick, right? I'm going to press Alt H to isolate our selection, right? Then we're going to go to face mode and just work on this post. So now I want you to see this stretching right now. So how do we fix this stretching here, right? This is square and this is just this elongated thing, right? So what we need to do is basically make this longer, correct? All right, so let's do that. So we can select this over here and just select the whole thing, and we can just turn this back down over here and we can squish it together and make it longer, about like something like that. Okay, now let's go and have a look. What did that do to the squares? Look at that, the squares are starting to look square, so you're not getting any stretching or anything, right? Another way you can see if you've got any stretching going on is by pressing this button over here, right? So the brighter it is, the more stretched out it is, right? So if I start stretching this, you see it gets redder and redder. If I stretch it down, it gets white, you know. This is a guide to show you if you have everything correct. So if it's red, it means it's good. If it's really white like this, it means it's not stretched out. So for now, this is what we want. So we're gonna turn this around. So we wanna rotate it. So I can either manually do it like this, right? Or I can go to transform here, and it's got all these very useful transformations here. So pivot, move, rotate, and I can just rotate it by 90 degrees like that. Okay, so it's just got the same transforms as move here, but with a lot of different options, moving it by like increments and stuff like that. So those are just transforms, right? So we're gonna turn this off because right now we don't need it. And we have one side of it figured out, right? So if we go to object mode just here, we see this side is stretched out, this side is stretched out, but this side is pretty okay. Maybe a little stretched out. So let's see if we can fix that. UV, there we go. All right, let's stretch it out. All right, now they're starting to look like squares. You see how helpful these squares are? Because you know they're squares, you can basically squash and stretch it until you see that you have actual squares. So that's the actual side. I'm just gonna set it aside and explain what is happening here when I'm moving it over here, you see? So in the traditional sense, your UV map goes from 0 to 1, okay? So if we look over here, this is 0, 0, 0. And when we go up here, this is 1. And then this is 1, right? So this square is the only square that your UVs are saved in, right? There are some specialty software that use these other squares, right? These are called UDIMs, okay? So for now, we're not gonna put anything on these other UDIMs because whatever is on this UDIM will repeat over here. So if I move it here, you know, it's basically like it's a repeat of that one for any other software. But very special softwares use these different UDIMs. So we want to be in this square only, okay? So this square represents our texture file, right? So you have a texture file, an image, if it's square, if it's long, whatever it is, it's going to fit in that square. And let's just say each one of those squares represents a pixel, right? So if we have all this empty space that we're not using, right? Because, you know, in the time where PlayStation, 2s and PlayStation 1s were around, we only had like 8 gigs of RAM, right? So imagine the whole game, all the textures in the game had to fit onto a disk that is 700 megabytes, okay? So they had to play a very good Tetris over here to fit all those textures in as much texture UV space as possible. So basically, if they wasted a UV space like we have right now, right, it would be like, do it again, right? Because they only had 256 pixels by 256 pixels to work with. So they have to be very creative with how they would pack these UVs. So when you finish UV mapping and you're packing into this square, it's called UV packing, right? So nowadays, we can use 2048 for most consoles. Although not all the texture maps are 2048, so 2K, right? Their light maps are usually 1K, so 1024, because there's a lot of objects in the games or animations or whatever, right? And when you see all these, like imagine you're looking at a forest, right? How many textures are there? There's the bark of the tree, so there's one texture for every tree that's duplicated. There's one texture for the leaf, thousands of them. So now you've only got 2 textures. So if you work smart with textures, you can minimize the amount of disk space that you use when you are shipping a game or rendering a scene, right? So it's working smart to kind of minimize your workload. So going back to here, let's just quickly do this as well. So again, I don't see the top of this thing, right? So I can just go here to object mode, go to face mode like this, and I can just delete this. I don't need to see this because this is gonna end up inside the model, and how much space did it save me over here? And it made me realize that, hey, I don't need that much to work with here. So now I know this is all the 3 sides. So this is one side. If I select it, I can look around, look around, look around. Oh, there it is. That's this side. So this square is this side of the model, and these are the other side. So I don't have to cut these now open because now I know what it is. I can just select the whole thing. It's gonna do face, because edges, right? See, if I select this edge here, right? This is only half of the edge. The other half is over here because it's shared between this and that. It'll make sense right now what I'll do, right? So if I select the whole thing and stretch out the whole thing, and let's have a look at the squares here. You see they're beginning to squash as I stretch this, right? So it's having an opposite effect. So as I stretch this, these are going to squash. And as I scale this out, the squares are gonna get smaller, right? That means it's gonna have more resolution. So I'm just gonna eyeball this to here, right? So now we've got something that is pretty good. It could stretch a lot more. So we're gonna try and stretch it until it's all squares. Or maybe we're just gonna have to do this to make it squares. Something like that. So if I check it now, all around, it should be squares, right? So I'm getting a good texture projection here, right? So let's dial this back down, and then we're gonna stitch this to this so it's just one continuous piece, correct? All right, so we're gonna select this edge, and we're gonna move it. So you see, when I selected that edge, what happened was, it's like selecting, it's when I hover over, it's gonna highlight the thing on the other side again and again, because that's the shared edge, right? On the model, there's only one edge here, right? So it's this part of the UV shell, the corner is here, and the other part of the UV shell, the corner is here. So what we're gonna do is now stitch them together, just like a tailor would. So I'm gonna select this, go all the way down, and then shift select that. Did that do it? Nope. So what I'm gonna do now is basically do it this way. Select it on the model because I know I've cut the bottom part and the top part, so it's just gonna select the side. So now I can go to my cut and sew, right? And I've got a stitch together option. So the stitch together has two other options here, A to B and B to A. So if I press A to B, it's gonna move A to B. So let's see. So you see it moved the first one A to B, and if I do B to A, it's gonna move the other one to the other, right? Very simple and easy to understand. So now we've done a nice UV for the post. Let's just set that aside, even though we're not supposed to put these things over there. I like to put them aside because I want to work on the other part of the model. So we can go to object mode again, press Control Shift H to bring everything back. Okay, and now we're gonna UV map this post bar, and oh my god, look at all the things wrong with it, right? So I'm just gonna go to the simple view here, and I'm gonna press Alt H just to see this. Okay, so now I need to project the UV that I can understand, because this is so messed up I don't even know where to begin, right? So what we're gonna do is basically just like this projector. So somebody go stand in front of the projector, please, because I can't get that. Can you?
Okay, my God.
Just stand in front of it. You see how the projector is projecting an image onto him? That's how texturing works, all right? That's exactly how. So we're gonna now project the texture to it to see what happens. You can sit down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let's project. So we've got many different project options, right? So we go to create here. I know it's very hard to see on that projector, but we've got automatic projection, which I don't want you to use at this point, right? Camera based, so it'll take the camera point of view in consideration. So if I go and select the whole thing, right, and I go to create camera based, it's just going to match that one to one. So if I look at the projection from my point of view, look what it looks like. It looks like exactly what happened when we stood in front of the projector. But then when you go to the side, you get all these stretched out pixels, which is not ideal. Okay, so that's camera projection. So let's now go and try the other projection. So we've got create, we've got normal based projection. So it takes all the normals into consideration and projects it from the normal that we've selected, so or one of them. We've got cylindrical, which is creating a cylinder like that and tries to project something around it. So if I go over here and create cylindrical projection and project, I can basically move these things around. So I can go over here and move it on top. Maybe try the side view, press F, and then move it here. So it's basically projecting it through a cylinder. So you can see it did a pretty good job. If we look at the pixels right now, so I go to perspective, you can see all the squares go all around, right? That's pretty good, right? Wouldn't you say? But you get all this weird stretching on the side, right? So there's many different types of projection. You can have planar, so you can project from the left, from the right, from the top, from the bottom. You can have spherical. So if you have a spherical object like an eyeball, you can do a spherical projection, right? If you have an object that's based on one single plane that is really good, you can choose that and project onto it. So this is just the starting point, okay? Don't think of it, oh, it's got to do a perfect job here. Not really, right? So we start here because it's the best place to be, and let's get started with the unwrapping. As you can see, each one of them has their own UV map, right? Every object in Maya has a UV, right? Sometimes they go green. If they don't have a UV, they'll be glowing green. It's like, hey man, I don't know the UV of this thing, right? But Maya needs to know what the UV is, all right? So here we've got the UV. We've got this, the cut. So where we cut the UV is called a seam, right? So the seams are thicker lines here, so we can see where it's cut, right? So imagine if you had wrapped a sticker all around the post box, and then you tear it off. Where you cut it at the center is where that seam is, right? For face unwrapping, usually it's like, those surgeons who do Botox or whatever, they'll draw with a marker, like, where they're gonna cut, same thing. We're drawing seams. So let's look at this model a bit more closely, see what's happening. So we know that both ends are not UV'd very nicely, and we know the inside is pretty cool. We know that, hey, what's happening on the side of these ridges? They're getting stretched out, right? So we're gonna address all of these problems. So because I can't really select anything here, it's very hard to understand what I'm selecting when I'm doing that here. So as you can see, if you have less polygons, it's a lot easier to start selecting stuff. When you have too many polygons, it's like, oh my God, what am I looking at, right? So I'm just gonna go into my model and start selecting these curves. And because the topology is somewhat good in this model, I can just select it and it'll select the things I want, right? And the topology is not the best for this because it comes down here, goes back up there. So I have to do a bit more work to go and deselect the things I don't want, right? So let's say I wanted to cut that, I wanted to cut it off right here, right? So that I'll have like one shell just for this part, right? So let's do that. First, let me get there we go. So I've selected this edge around here, all the way around, right? And I'm gonna select the edge underneath, okay? Now it's also selected all around. That's a good thing because I can cut that as well, because I need that to be just a simple projection from the top or from the bottom. So I've selected all those, right? So I've selected all this part on the bottom here, right? I know it's very hard to see on the projector, and all the way around this thing here, right? So I'm just gonna go here and press cut, okay? And the good thing is I can go to UV shell mode now, select that part, and move it away. So I know this is that part. I can select this, move it away, and I know what that is now, right? Oh wow, look at that. Now I can see a bit more clearly what I'm doing, right? So this part that we were getting UV stretches in, I can just select the shell and start creating another either camera projection just like this. So I can position the camera just like that and create camera based. And here we are, boom, nice projection, right? If I show the squares again, great, fantastic, right? So I'm gonna put these pieces that I think I'm done with to the side, right? And this one I gotta stitch it together, so I can come in here and go to edge. Now it's gonna select it like that. I'm just gonna select it like this, and then deselect the parts I don't want, and again deselect the parts I don't want. Again, deselect the parts I don't want. So there's a lot of selecting here, okay? Select, select, select. Here we go. Okay, I can select all of that and then again go down here and stitch them together.
Will it still work if I miss an edge?
It'll still work. It just sometimes, you know, like let's say we missed an edge here in the center, okay? We deselected these two edges, right? And then we stitch it together, right? It's just that these two are not gonna be connected, so you would have to come here and then stitch those as well, right? For something like that, when it's really difficult to stitch together, right? You can actually go here and just select all of this and just create a planar map, right? And just, you know, do it that way. Just do a projection again on it, you know? So if I go to face, select it, create planar, right? So we want the planar to be in a different, so I'm gonna press this little cross here and I'm gonna go to the side here, press F, and I'm gonna rotate it, not this way, not this way, maybe this way. There we go, 90 degrees. And kind of call it a day, right? So I'm just gonna say that's what I want, right? And now I can come in here and move it around, squish it back to normal, and I don't have to do that weird selection, you know, because I just projected onto it again, you know. So if I go and check the UVs here, we're good. Correct? So it really is up to you how you want to get these pieces, but get the major pieces out. So let's just get all these major pieces out. So for these objects that, you know, they have an outside and an inside, it's a bit difficult. So we're just gonna cut the lid from here, right? So we're gonna go here and just do a circle there, and we're gonna cut it, right? And then if I go over here and go to face and scroll up and go to shell mode so I can pick the whole shell, now I know this is the outside and this is in the inside, right? So I can see there's some misalignment here, right? I can come in here and just fix it here, so I can just select that and kind of go down, cut, and select this part, you know, and this part is now supposed to be going back here, so I'm gonna stitch it together. There's one open face and then stitch together. All right, so I'm just gonna say so. Right? So now we've got the inside. Let's have a look. Beautiful. We've got the inside, you know, and then we've got the outside. What about this? What about the back of the inside? Where is that? Or is there no back to the inside? No, there's no back to the inside. That's good. And, you know, we want to select these ones in the front as well, just to be sure. So this one has a lot of these ridges that are stretched out. I'm going to show you a little trick. It's called the unfold tool. right? So this is the front, and you know, if I wanted to come in here and like stretch these out, I had to come in here. To do it manually, I would have to come in here and basically select it all like that and be like, oh, I gotta be precise, and kind of like, you know, stretch them out, make sure there's enough space. Too much work, right? What I'm gonna do is use this unfold tool. So I can select this whole thing, put it on the side here, just for me to select it easier, and then go down here where I have the unfold tool, right? So I can unfold, optimize, and unfold again, right? So this one you can paint the unfold. So let's have a look at what happens when we use a brush and we paint it. You know, it's gonna just move around and kind of stretch out. It's kind of like a smooth brush. It relaxes the island or the shell, the UV shell. Or instead of painting it on, I can just press unfold and I'll just do the job. So now if we go look at it, so one thing is slanted now, but that's totally fine. But the sides aren't stretched out anymore. Okay? So what I can do is take this whole thing, turn it, and now we've got a nice flat side like that. So if we go to this side, beautiful texture, right? All the way around. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to come here, and now that I've UV'd these two items, right? So I've got these two items. Either I can have a single texture for each one of them, or I can have them as one. So let's just create a duplicate of these. So I'm just gonna duplicate these two just so I have two different options, right? If I come in here and select them both, you see I can see the UVs for both, and I can go to face and just start packing this stuff in, right? But it's very hard because I'm selecting this, now I can't see the other ones, and I gotta select this, and you know? It's very difficult. So for now, I can go in here and select this, and then go and shift select the other part, mesh, combine. When I combine them, it just becomes one mesh. So now I can start packing this. So let's say, I mean, I'm not gonna waste your time by UV mapping in this entire thing, okay? This is where we're gonna kind of call it a day for UV unwrapping, and I'm just gonna go into UV packing right now, okay? So if I take this to a software, it's not gonna do a good job, okay? So a texturing software. Let's just see how that will work if I take this right now as it is to a texturing software. So let's go to export, selection, and call it WIP in the scenes, and we're gonna save it as an FBX. Painter. So I'm gonna introduce you to this software a little bit because it's really a cool, fun software, this one, right? But it's also a very good software to show you how that bad UV can affect your texturing. So we're gonna open a new one. We're gonna have like an Unreal Engine like this, and we're gonna select our thing on the desktop. Where's my desktop? Oh no, I gotta sign in. So again, you all have access to this software as well. So don't fret, it's all here. Let's go to this PC, or so we go to scenes. I can copy the URL for this or the path, press enter, VIP, there we go. And we're not gonna auto unwrap here because this has the option. So here is our letterbox, correct? Just gonna go quickly here, bake the maps, make sure it's 2048. Bake selected maps. Oh, something's wrong already. So you see, because of our UV placement, this is all gone wonky, right? So let's put a cool texture on there for now, cool material. See how it behaves. You see, we've got stretching on this side, you know. We've got weirdness happening on this side. This is a mess, right? So we really can't use this right now as it is. So let's start packing the UVs nicely so we can texture it and give it materials really nice, okay? So how do we pack this? Okay, let's go and pack it. We're gonna go here and go to UV. We're gonna take this and we're gonna make it smaller and we're gonna put it over here, okay? We're gonna take the outside of the, we're gonna go to shell and we're gonna take the outside and we're gonna pack it in here. Now we're gonna realize that some things are gonna be smaller than the others. I'm gonna turn this off for now because it's very distracting. So you see, like, now we have to prioritize things, right? Oh, you know, inside the letterbox, is it as important as the outside? Not really, right? So I'm gonna make it smaller because it's not visible to the eye. So I'm gonna give it a lot less pixels in my texture. So this is where things are allocated their texture. So if this was a 2048 by 2048 pixel image, this would only be 200 pixels or something like that, right? So I'm allocating by changing their sides or their sizes, right? I'm allocating importance to them, right? So I'm just stretching this out and I'm like, okay, this is very important, so I want to make it the most dominant, right? Even if I come in here and say edge, I'm gonna select this edge and that's the front edge. So if I go to object mode, so you see this weird shape is making me waste all this space in the middle, right? So I'm gonna go see what's up, what's going on here, right? You always have to be like that. You have to be very cheap when it comes to UV space, all right? Now let's see what's going on here. Let's go to edge. Oh, this edge is just right in front of this thing. Do I need the front lip of this thing, right? So I can come in here and just adjust it a bit more. So I'm gonna cut this off. I'm gonna go to UV shell, make sure I collapse these, right? I can show it from the camera point of view, create, camera based, and I can just make it very tiny and put it somewhere I don't really see, right? Again, I can make this bigger, make it bigger, something like that, right? And this one, maybe I can come in here and go to edge, select this edge, cut it, and try to unwrap it and see what happens. So if we go to vertex, face, much better call, yes. And then I go to my unfold tool, make sure my brush is smaller. It can't be really smaller, but because I don't see it, I don't really care how big it is. I'm just gonna make it really tiny over here, right? But there, I've packed my UV space, my UV shells here, as tight as I possibly can. I should never overlap these, okay? And I should give them some breathing room, right? And this is called UV map or UV padding. The space between the UV shells are padding, okay? So that looks pretty good to me, right? If I press this, I'm pretty sure I'm only in UV1, right? So now if we go and look at the mailbox, so everything we see on the outside is nice and big. We've got some stretching over here. So I'm gonna come and address that. Make sure there's no stretching. So we can have it this big, right? We can come in here and kind of see everything like that. So, you know, so the inside is low resolution, outside high resolution, correct? Now I see that this thing is not taking as much space here. Maybe if I rotate it, you know, and kind of make it this way. Does it stretch? Not by much. Still cool. All right. Let's call that good right there. And now I'm gonna come back in here, go to object mode, and this time I'm gonna export this, export selection as work in progress. Go back to Substance Painter, start a new thing, select the same one, bring it in, press OK, and we're gonna discard this. And now if I go in here and bake selected textures, oh, we're getting good results over here. Okay, back to painting mode. Look at that, very clean. We've got this thing coming through here, but that's totally fine. So we can actually come in here and throw this material over, and look at that. We're getting nice wrapping around of the material, right? So remember what I said about these areas back here where you've got these weird polygons when you were modeling. So we've got all these weird stretchiness and all that. So if your topology is not good, no matter how good we've kind of, oh, actually we didn't pack this guy in here, that's why. It's very hard to control these kind of things, right? So I'm gonna pack this guy in here as well. All right, so we're gonna make this one smaller. Make this smaller as well. Pack it over here. Maybe bring this like that. So you see, it's a very fun thing to do for me, at least, right? And you know, your lever can be up there, you know, few letters can be up somewhere. You know, it always depends on you, right? Because for me, underside of the letterbox is not that important. I'm not giving that any priorities, right? So I can make this as small as I want. Because nobody's gonna go, well, look at that, man, so low res, right? You know, you just have to imagine what the viewer is looking at, right? So here we go. We've got some empty space here that we can use for the lever or some letters or whatever it is. And now we can go back to object mode, file, export selection, WIP, yes. Go back here, file, new, select the same thing, okay, discard, over here, bake maps.
These steps a little bit, like these baking steps.
I will go through these when we're going to texturing. I just want to show you what effects your UV mapping has on texture. This software is a very fun software to use. It's got a lot of cool stuff, right? So basically we can go in here and put this space, whatever it is here, right? Or actually, I'm going to show you some smart materials which are pretty cool. So we have a paint here that is like, you know, so you know, you can basically do all this. So now we've got nice texture over here, like nice texture everywhere, right? And again, I can have wood material, so wood, and I can put the wood on top, right? But I don't want the whole thing to be wood, right? I can actually go in here and do a black mask, and basically when I have this mask I can go to these poly select tools and just select all these polys and be like, I want this part to be wood. So you see how topology is helping me here? If this was bad topology and I had to select this wood, oh my god, it'll take me another hour to just select that, right? But right now I have a nice wooden pole here. The texture is wrapping around beautifully, right? I've got my textures on the box, again, beautifully, right? And I can look at my UV space. Look how clean that is, right? So UV mapping is one of the most important steps before you start texturing, okay? So I really want you to understand UV mapping because it saves your life down the road, alright? So I want you to go back to your tables. Sorry, didn't give you a warning about that. Back to your computers and start unwrapping your model. Okay, so at this point you should be finished by now, right, with your model. So go and unwrap it. If you have any questions, yell no. Okay, no hand raising. Yes.
I was just wondering, is UV mapping really important even if you're just having like a solid color with like textures?
Solid color wouldn't look that good. It only is used for like what's it called? Like if you do rendering like 2D animation or cell shaded animation. Yeah. But even then, like of the game Borderlands, have you played it? Right? So there's a game called Borderlands or any other thing. For them to kind of have something be rendered okay, you have if your UV maps are over each other, if you even render a solid color, it's going to be flickering. Right? So it's always a good idea to have UV shells properly displayed on that 0-1 display. Okay?
Yeah.
Hey Mark,
Yes.
are you gonna put this on campus?
I just recorded it, so yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna forget it later.